everybody, it's Anthony Brogdon. I'm coming at you. Ooh, man, y'all gonna really like this one. Y'all like them all, but y'all gonna like this one too. This is gonna be gooder than good. This gonna be greater than great. And I'm excited to have this sister on the show. She one of them doctors. That's what it is. She's one of them doctors. And she did all this through the educational system to reach the highest heights, which I would imagine she had a whole bunch of stuff to go through to get there, understandably, like everybody. But everybody has their own story, and she's got one. She's going to share a little bit of that with us here at Strong Inspirations. If I didn't say I'm Anthony Brogdon, I'm an ordinary guy trying to do something extraordinary by the people who come on the show like this one. You're going to love this. So hit the subscribe button. It's free. I don't ask no information. It just lets me know you like what I'm doing because it's incredible. I'm so fortunate to have people like this lady come on here that is just mind blowing to me and has made me a better person. Hit the like button. There is no love button. Hit the notifications bell so you get a notified that there's new content on Strong Inspirations. And I'm releasing something every day. I'm coming at you with the 1-2 punch. And then tell somebody about Strong Inspirations. Don't keep it to yourself. That ain't cool. I'm telling you, because I think you get a blessing by letting this flow, this good Black history and wellness too. As you know, we do talk about eating right and health and mental and things of that sort. Now, I'm still coming off of kind of an emotional high because I just had a lady on the show who grew up as a sharecropper. Watch, watch that video. I've had a guy who tried to spy on a KKK rally and got caught. Watch that video. I had a guy whose great grandfather, or maybe not great, but just grandfather, was almost lynched in Troy, Alabama, and he got away. Watch that video. I have a guy on the show who owns the oldest Black-owned business in America. Watch that video, and so many others. Just let me tell you, all you do is when you go to the main page, scroll from there down the videos, and or just go to the icon that says videos and scroll. You'll see something that I know will catch your interest. There's over 600 of them here at Strong Inspiration. So do that, my friends. As you know, I'm an author. This is America's #1 Black business history book, and it's not just because I said it. I've had a few other people chime in that regard, and that's how I came up with that. But it is amazing, easy to read, and very comprehensive on the first Black business owner in America, businesses, all the way through enslavement through the 1960s. Cover a lot. That's why it's over 200 of them. But it's got even more than that, my friends. Get you a copy of this. Go to my website, businessintheblack.net, to hear where I'm speaking. And I spoke where I met this lady at the Gullah Geechee Festival. I had a book signing right across the street from the park. And we had a nice crowd. I was kind of shocked. There were people there that said, man, we watching your show and we knew you were coming. We came to meet you. Oh, I'm on to something now, my friends. So, and I'm speaking in a lot of places. All that again is on my website, businessintheblack.net. Now, you hear me use this term strong a lot. Strong is my favorite word. And in my world, strong stands for strength, tenacity, resilience, and a sense of oneness, nobility, and grace. And that is my introduction to the good-looking smooth lady on the channel today. Come on, sister, let's get it on.
All right, Anthony. What a great introduction.
Yes.
Well, my name is Dr. Gail Rearden, and I'm from a small place called Waltersboro, South Carolina, right off of I-95. And as Anthony said, I met him at the Gullah Festival in Beaufort, and he was such a gentleman. He helped us set up our tents and everything. And Anthony, I have not gotten a chance to read your book because my friend took it.
Oh,
Because I think you had like two left, and I got one, and
right.
he took it. So he said he's going to give it back to me so that I can read it.
Okay.
If not, I'm
All right.
probably just going to buy some more to share with others in our community. But I
Right.
thank you for having me on today, because I think the work that you're doing and the work that I'm doing is the kind of work that's necessary to kind of help our community become the great community it's supposed to be, and to try to help some of the problems we think we have, and many of us will agree are some of the difficulties we have to go through in our community.
All right. With that said, as we do with all my guests, I want my people to get to know you a little bit, on a personal level. Where were you born and raised, you say?
I was born, I was actually born in Charleston, but I was raised in Waltersboro, South Carolina. That's where my mother's family is from. My father's family is from a place called Edgefield, South Carolina, which is a very small town. But if you read about it in history, it has a lot of history as far as the African American community as well. There's some really renowned pottery that was done by an enslaved gentleman in Edgefield County, and and it's also known to be one of the, as far as history books, and these are not books written by people that look like us. These are just objective historians that stated Edgefield County was one of the most difficult counties for African American men in all of the previously enslaved states. Um,
Wow.
but my family was able, I'm very proud of my family. We were close knit family, and some of us are still there today. And my great great grandfather, those were able to um, amass land that's still in our family today. And
Oh,
I'm planning to do some artist residency there with my cousin, who's an
okay. Uh,
artist.
Now, hold on. Now, again, go back. What city where were you born and raised?
I was born in Walterboro.
Now, where's Walterboro?
It's right off of I-95. If you're going like to Hilton Head or Savannah, it's
Okay.
right off of I-95. It's a small town that's in a place called Colleton County, and Colleton County is known for the vast tens of thousands of acres of rice that was grown in this area. A lot of the wealth from this area came from rice cultivation.
All
And
right. Let me ask you now, your town, is it all black?
oh no, it is not all black.
Oh,
It's,
okay. So
I,
it's
get,
just
I can't remember the statistics on the percentage of whites and blacks, but I would say, in my opinion, it's a racially divided town.
oh, is that right?
To
Okay.
some degree, you have black communities, you have communities where they're like blacks and whites living, but to a large degree, it is. I've always considered it a racially divided town, especially when
Yeah,
it came
sure.
to politics.
Sure. Now, but where you grew up in a black neighborhood. Let's get to that point then, right? Your neighbors were black, or the white people live in your neighborhood?
My neighborhood was a neighborhood my father started. Like basically, he bought land, and then our home was the first house here, and then some of his friends bought houses. So basically, the community was individuals who either knew my parents or were friends with my parents, and up until recently, it has been an all black like professional community. I have a new
Does,
neighbor who is Caucasian. There were some retirees that
yeah.
moved next door to me.
What does it have a name? The
Um,
neighborhood.
no, it doesn't. My dad never named it.
Oh, your dad bought it. Oh man, that's good to hear because um and so did you go to school with all black kids or white kids too?
No, we had an integrated school. I mean, it was, I guess it probably was 50-50.
Oh, is that right? Did
Mhm.
you have any white friends growing up?
I had a few white friends growing up, from like the classes I was in, we would do stuff sometimes after school. But most of my friends were African American friends.
to have a white friend, did the other people shine against you? Like, why you hanging out with that white girl? What have you?
Well, no, I didn't hang out like that. I mean, this was somebody I was like, sometimes like she would stay the night here, especially like if we were going to something the next day. I mean,
Oh,
she would.
she stayed over to the house.
Yeah, she stayed at our house.
Oh, how did her parents take to that? Evidently, they
Well,
said,
her
okay.
mother knew my mother, so I mean, we just like looking at TV or whatever. I mean,
Yeah, but okay, let's stay with that. Um, did you know? I assume, and I'm sure I'm correct. For you to have gone as far as you have educationally, you probably did pretty well in grade schools and that kind of thing. Did the white teachers do anything that you thought was kind of racist to hold you back, to not encourage you, that so on and so forth?
well, I guess nobody can hold me back, okay, because I'm just not having that. But I think when we had the only thing I remember, and I wouldn't when I was named valedictorian because I had been like the top honor student like for like at least like the last 2 years.
This is
It
high
was
school.
time in high school, so it was time to do the valedictorian speech, and the counselor who was over that had said, I need to start working on the speech. And I was like, okay, well, I need you all to do your complete tabulation, to confirm me as because I didn't want any games. And so she said, well, you can go ahead and start, working on the speech. And I'm like, no, I'm not going to do that. I remember I told my parents, I'm not writing any speech until I get the final say from them because to me it just didn't make sense. If you're talking about, well, we haven't done the final tabulation, which I knew I was going to be valedictorian. I mean, because I had been the top honor student for some time prior to that. But I just thought it was, I was proud how I took up for myself, and I didn't have to be disrespectful. But I'm like, I'm not going to start on the speech until you do your final tabulation because I don't want to start on a speech and then you come back and tell me there's some kind of error and I'm not doing the speech.
Okay,
So,
so what happened? Yeah, what happened?
and so, I mean, I gave the valedictorian speech and I did a very good job. I was very proud of it.
Did were the white kids happy for you?
Um, and we were so glad to graduate. I mean, I didn't see people saying they weren't happy for me.
Yeah,
You know,
yeah. Because I think you know what I'm getting at. There's some racism in that in everything we do.
mhm.
And I would think that there was somebody like the principal, like, oh man, that girl, we couldn't hold her back, or a teacher said, because I had one instance where a young lady told me that she had all A's, what have you, and a teacher gave her a B in her senior year, just so she couldn't, what she thought be the class valedictorian.
Um, well, I never had that happen.
Okay,
But I
okay,
was
cool.
a great student and I did my work. I mean, that was my focus. And um, I thought I was a well-rounded student. I did very well in band. Um, I got to go to all state. I got awards. I mean, I worked hard and I got what I deserved for the work I put in, I felt.
Let me flip the story then. Did the black people were they happy for you, the students? Because within our community, somebody who's trying to excel in academically, there are other kids that want to shine against them. Did you have any of that per se?
I didn't have that because many of our African American students did well. So I'm trying to remember. Several of us were like if you said in the top 10, several of us were in the top 10.
Uh,
So we did well, and I think
okay.
everybody was happy for one another. And still, even now, we still have some contact with one another.
How big is the town? How many people live in your town?
I didn't look at the local statistics. Um, I'm not sure.
I mean, but you just to give an idea, it's 30,000, right?
I would say 20. I would say at least 20 to 30,000.
What's next to y'all? What's the big city near you where you grew up?
That would be Charleston. That would be
Okay,
Charleston. That's a bigger city. And about
okay.
2 hours from here is Columbia.
When did you have enough to do to hang out in your town? Did you had a little bar that a little kid bar or bowling alley or
Yeah,
yeah? How did you have fun?
we had parties. We didn't. I don't think we had a bowling alley then, but I think one came back. Recently they had one. People may have a party. Um, I was in the band, so that was most of my life. Band practice and performances we had to do, and then I
Okay,
had, so and then if there was like a like governor school for the arts in the summer, so I had other academic stuff to do in the summer, so I was busy. But if somebody had a party, you would go to a party, or um like if the parents are taking the kids on a trip, that kind of
I
thing.
got you. I had heard of an instance, and maybe I don't suspect it's your town, but asking the question might lead to something where
Mhm.
the town shut down at 5 o'clock for some maybe going back to slavery. I think that's what it was. Is there a note of what happened in slavery? Is there historical markers in your town?
Um, as far
Plantations, any of
as far
those
as
kind of?
favorite, no, no, that's what I'm working on.
Okay,
Because one of the things about slavery, um, you have to look at it from the full picture. When I was in school, when we learned about slavery, the perspective was that the Africans were brought here to be civilized and to embrace Christianity. And so I remember
and
in
so that's what they taught you all.
yeah, I mean that was one of the perspective, yes, because I was like, okay,
Wow.
so really they brought us here because they wanted to teach us Christianity, and then the slavery happened, and that's not the truth. And but the danger of that is parents have to make certain their children get the truth and the whole story. Because when I'm listening to this, I'm like, okay, well, that seems altruistic, but other people who were being evangelized, they weren't taken up, put on boats, and shipped across the ocean. The word went to them, and the evangelists left it there. When people were spreading
I got
Christianity,
what you're saying.
they went and they spread the word, bid them goodbye, and went on about their business. They did not pack them up and take them across the river.
Right.
And so I'm not saying the history books did not talk about the other parts that happened, but the perspective was this kind of went wrong. It started like this, and then it went into unpaid labor, and that's not what it was. There was
No, no
there was
question.
really no. There was from what I've read, I don't see where there was any sincere effort to Christianize the slaves. Okay, in fact, when you came here, you couldn't read and write. You couldn't read a book. The only thing they taught you was obey your masters. That's it.
Yeah. Well, was there any, from what you remember, any mention of the greatness in Africa?
You mean like when I was in high school?
Yeah, yeah, yeah. When they were telling you that story, were they saying, did they forget uh, what came out of Africa and Egypt in particular?
I mean, you may
Uh,
talk about the pyramids, but it wasn't from the perspective of these people being people from like African, originating people,
yes.
and so as far as me learning about the greatness of the Africans, that is when I went to college.
All right.
That I got that when I went
Gotcha.
to college, and it was a
So,
life changing experience for me.
So I guess what I'm getting at is you were astute enough to say, hold on, that makes no sense. But maybe your friend in the chair next to you, that was a brainwash. Is that the way we would
I
call
wouldn't
it?
say it's I just want to be clear. It's the perspective that was there, because I don't want to make you think that they didn't teach us about slave labor. Of course they taught about that in
Oh,
some of
did
the,
they? Okay.
yeah, and then they
Okay.
went on into, I'm just saying the perspective of some of these books, the perspective was, I just remember with learning this, I'm like, oh, okay, so they really wanted to give us Christianity, which is good. But then later on, I'm like, well, how did this horrific behavior happen? And so
Yes, I can
you have
imagine.
to look at the books, because you have to look at the perspective that they're bringing it from. I don't remember all the details, but I
Yeah,
do
yeah,
remember.
not sure. I understand that.
I remember thinking, okay, so they didn't just hate us. No, it was like you brought us here to become Christians, and then it just went left, and that's not what's transpired. And
Did,
and
did,
the,
did any of that ever make you think white people are better than black people?
um, I never see. I was raised in a household where um black excellence was promoted. I don't care what you do. If you cleaning the roads, be good at it. Black excellence was promoted in my house, and then in my um family, and even in our social community. But when I will say this much, when we started learning about slavery when I was in school, sometimes there was a dread when you were in a history book and it was coming to that, because you're thinking, wow, how did my people, my people they were basically presented almost as inanimate objects. Here are the slaves. They never really were given any, except for a few examples of personality. It made you think that this group as a whole didn't have any aspirations, couldn't think for themselves, which is absolutely not the truth.
That's
One of the
right.
things you have to remember, why would you bring a group and go through, even the people who brought these people over, there was a great risk to them, because you could pretty much die on the seas. I remember, I don't remember the name of it. There was one boat where they basically were running out of food, so they just
That's
threw some
right.
things over, because they're like, listen, I mean, we can't feed them. And so it was risky for them as well. But it all boils down to just money, which we'll get to in a minute. But in school, I there was a dread getting to that part, because I'm like, I just used to wonder, who were my great great grandparents. It was a sad feeling. And then you have your other colleague, your mainstream or Caucasian colleagues, that they didn't have to go through that
I
emotional
got
part
you.
of that history learning. But basically, you knew that the book was presenting that they were superior to us. But for me, I'm like, no, you're not, because I know my worth, and it did not hurt that I was the top honor graduate too.
I love it.
So for me, I was like, this is not. And I saw so many of my colleagues that excelled. Um, Most of my friends or associates in high school, they were advanced students.
I
And so
got
I
you.
was really proud of how we presented our community. But I also knew there were some kids that just didn't have the same opportunities, they didn't have the same chance, but they were smart. And what I have learned from that, it is our responsibility. If you know there's a child with promise, and if you got a Bentley and you got $1 million house, why can't you get with that parent and say, hey, I see John or Susie has good potential. I'd like to work with you so we can help your child.
I
And
got
so
you.
and I look at it like that's our responsibility. Um, if I can, I'll kind of go into what kind of.
Well, before you do that, I want to stay on that other just a tad bit more in this regard. Where is the enslavement at in your family?
Wow. Okay. Um. So for my mother's side, um, I found out that her great grandfather was enslaved in a place called Bamberg, South Carolina,
Which is how
and
far?
probably about 30 or 45 minutes from here. He um he was enslaved, but I think he was respected in by the white community after freedom. I think his father was enslaved, and he actually was enslaved and then freed. I can't remember if his father was freed, but like he had a house, he had land, and so he was relatively respected in the community. And then um my mother's on her father's side, their parents were enslaved in Colleton County, not far from my house. And I think from what I gather in the what I've been able to read, my grandfather was respected by the other slaves. I don't know if I doubt he was a slave driver, but I think he was maybe one of the lead people, because I think he was a field laborer. So he was one of the lead people. And from what I'm gathering, because I didn't see any definitive evidence to this, but I know he was respected by the others because of the leadership that he showed after slavery. And
I got
so,
you.
and so, so when I started learning about him, I'm like, oh my God, that is where I get it from. Because I'm a physician. I'm a pretty down to earth person. I have been blessed to, I think my patients appreciate the care that I give them, because I treat everybody the same. I don't care if you're poor, rich, black, white. I try to give everybody my best because that's what they deserve. When people come to you and they have lowered all of their vulnerabilities to tell you their medical information, then you need to appreciate that and do the best you can for them. And so
Okay.
that's my perspective. But one of the things um, I have learned is that I'm an advocate. And I've learned that from my great grandfather when I started reading about him. I do not tolerate being treated unfairly. I used to wonder why it used to bother me so much, because sometimes I would see people being taken advantage of, and I'm like, why am I fighting for this person? But I think a lot of it was I was smart enough to know that when you see somebody else being abused, guess what? You're next. If you sit there, sometimes being complicit with stuff like that, the bully may not realize they're bullying until you tell them, hey, that's not right. And I've had that happen to me, even professionally. I've seen something happen to a colleague, and I'm like, okay, so maybe I'm gonna try to play it like this. And then I just realized when people don't want you or your kind, you can try to be the best Negro you can. It's not gonna
Yeah.
be good enough.
Yeah.
And I had that happen one time in life, and I can tell you it was a life altering experience for me, because I'm like, I've worked as hard as I have to get where I am, and I'm excelling at what you brought me here to do, but you still got a problem with me. And when I started looking at it, I said, you know what? I know what the problem is. And it was their problem, it wasn't mine. But I think I get that spirit from my great grandfather. I know I do. And I'm glad that he had that spirit in him, because when I look at the people in my family and how God has blessed them to give to the community and to excel in their own professions, um, it started making me realize we got to start thinking and recognizing the ancestors, because this is where it all starts. And so when I read and learned about my great grandfather, I was like, you know what, I got to get on the ball, because I've been I've had 20 years that I could have been, you know, working towards some of the things I wanted to do, but I was busy doing other things. And we just don't, my opinion is, as African Americans, we don't have, we cannot afford to not embrace and promote our culture.
All right, I'm gonna ask you this question.
Okay.
You talked about your great grandfather. What did he do? What's and your other ancestors? Tell us some of those stories.
Well, my great great grandfather, he was part of the Combahee River Raid. So
Oh, okay.
that's what that,
Explain
you know.
that one too, because some
So
people don't know.
this is such a beautiful story. In 1863, Harriet Tubman and Colonel Montgomery and others actually had three boats that were coming from the Port Royal area to rescue slaves. And what they did, the slaves were coming to the fields about 4 o'clock in the morning. When they went, I mean, it was pitch black when they went on those fields. Many of them barefoot, half starved, half naked. They went to work that morning, and she came with, they had three boats. One of them kind of got bogged down, I think. So the other two boats came and rescued the slaves off the various plantations on the Combahee River. And my great great grandparents, my great 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 grandparents, and 700 other people were rescued that night. And when they were brought to Beaufort, the freemen in Beaufort and the whites, northern abolitionists, lined the streets to greet them. I think about 10 o'clock in the morning. And they came in all manners of dress, some half naked, half starved, um, just, you know, so glad to be freed. And so they were basically processed at a place called Tabernacle Church, where the late Reverend Kenneth, Kenneth Hodges, um, actually had a monument to the Combahee River Raid and Harriet Tubman placed there last year.
Wow.
I can tell you, Anthony, when I stood there, I was in tears because I said, Lord, it is 160 years later, and I am literally standing in the spot where my great 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 grandparents came.
How did you hear that story that he was a part of that?
I read it in the Combahee book. We knew he was a U.S. colored troop, but we didn't. I mean, I didn't know the whole story. My aunt Bertha, she knew the whole story. I
Oh,
didn't
is
know.
that right?
Yeah, and
So,
so the Combahee book was great for that. You know, it talked a lot about the military tactics that they use. So that book has been recognized for by the Civil War, like some of like the top Civil War organizations, because of the veracity of the information. And you know, it's just a really respectable book because it tells you about what I like about the slave part she talks about. It talks about the families. So when I look in that book and I see my family's name, I then realize why some of our community has been together for almost 200 years.
I got you.
And it's
Interject right here. The
Mhm.
lady who wrote the book, Etta,
Yeah, Dr. Etta Fields Black.
Etta Fields Black. Everybody, she's has been on the show and talked about the book. So look for her video.
Great.
Let me ask you this.
Uh,
So he did that, and then your other grandfather did something else. Grandparent did something amazing too.
no, this is the same one, I think.
Okay,
Um,
okay.
this is the same one you're referencing.
But
Because
he owned land. He had a lot of land. Somebody had a lot of land. You said.
yes, my grandfather in Edgefield. But I don't think I mentioned that to you. But what happened was, where we were, this grandfather that, you know, with the Combahee River Raid, he actually had 10 acres. He had 10 acres of land. But one of his colleagues who was freed, he had amassed 500 acres of land. This man was so well known in many of the history books you can look at, they mention him. His name was Ben Garrett, and his family still lives near that community today. So the grandfather that had the land was in Edgefield.
All right. Let's go to the point of who's the first in your family to go to college?
Wow, this is you walk right into this. Before I answer that, let me share this. Recently, we had a family reunion, and my cousin and I started a high school fund. So every student that graduates from high school, we give them, a monetary award. And I looked at my mother's high school picture with one of her cousins. I said, you know what, Mama's line, of cousins were the first high school graduates after freedom. After my mother's grandmother was a baby when freedom came, and she didn't get an education. My mother's father did not get an education, although he owned land and he owned a mercantile store near the plantation. So he did pretty well for himself. But my mother was the first to go to high school. Her and her sister were the first to go to high school and to graduate from college. And so I was sharing with our cousins, this is significant. We are much closer to slavery than you realize. I mean, my mother's grandmother was born a slave, right? She was I think a little baby when they had the freedom raid. And so our children don't realize this. They think that slavery is something from 1,000 years back. And we don't realize that what we're going through today is so similar to what happened in the Reconstruction period, 1877,
Yeah,
when
I
that
got
era
you.
was coming down. And so I was sharing with our cousins, value your education. I would be the I would be the second generation from my mother's father's line to go to college. And many of us are doctors, lawyers, dentists, realtors. And I tell them that's because my great great grandfather did not get an education, but he taught his children and others in his community the importance of voting and trying to get land so that you can have something to lean on when you need to send your kids to school. Because during that time, they had schools every now and then, but if you had schools in that community, usually like 3 or 4 months out the year because people had to work.
Did what? How does a person operate in society with no education?
Wow. Well, in my opinion, there are various types of education. Some people go to college, some people go to tech school, some people go to the school of hard knocks. So everybody goes to some kind of school, okay, whether you realize it or not. Um, the first schooling we get is in the home. When you're at home, you learn a lot of your habits, whether it's to be clean or not be clean, to work or not to work. Um, you learn a lot of your habits in your home. Many people who go to school, they get a job, start working. First thing they want to do, buy a car. Okay. We need to start teaching our children about financial literacy, because education does not mean you're going to get rich. It does not mean that you're going to be able to get all the things you want, but money management can help you get there. It's not how much money you make, is what you do with your money.
I love it. I love it.
It's what you do with your money. I know. I had a friend. Her mother had what we would consider just an average job, but that woman was consistent in investing her money with gentlemen who a lot of my parents' friends and they did do some investments with. And one day she went and found out how much she had. She said, honey, I ain't doing nothing else. That lady said she was not going back to work because she had reached her goal, but she wasn't pulling from it. She just was consistent. And she didn't make no whole lot of money. I just want to be clear. She
Yeah, I
was
got you.
consistent with it. And what happens, I even remember one of my friend's mother, she was a single mother, and she had she had 3 children. I've always respected that lady because she worked, and I would hear her talking to her friends about like her savings and putting her money up. And I noticed that even with her being a single mother, they never went without. Everything was smooth
I
sailing
got
because
you.
that woman was financially responsible and she had her priorities in place, and she's able to live well today because of that. We have to start teaching our children that. There's nothing wrong with education, but you don't want to be an educated fool because you
I
can
got
be.
you. I got you. Let me ask you this: was there something about your, let's say, your father that was a little quirky, for lack of a better word? Let me give you an example. I know a guy who told me his father, he folded his clothes and he kept them in the drawer, and it was immaculate. He said
Uh-huh.
he just couldn't understand how this guy took so much pride in his t-shirts, his undershirts, and his underwear in the drawer. Was there something like that that you remember about your father that's kind of passed down to family to family? That
That was the opposite of my dad. He was not like organized like that. I
okay,
wish he was because I think I've inherited from him I'm not as organized as my sister was. My sister was almost like that guy you mentioned. But that reflects discipline. That reflects discipline, and also that reflects somebody that values what they have. Sometimes when you have a whole lot, you're like, oh, we'll just throw that over there. But if that's the
right
only t-shirt you got, you are gonna fold it and put it in the drawer.
there, that's right, that's right.
And so I think that we lived a good life, and I think that sometimes what comes with that is if you got a lot, if you have 20 more shirts, you may not be as careful with the one shirt,
I
like that.
got you. did
But
did you have to, are you known to wake up early in the morning? I know a
um
lady, she told me she gets up at 3 o'clock in the morning. She don't have to be at work till 8. Is there
yeah.
something like that in your family?
No, I do not get up there. I get up, I usually get up around 5:30 or 6 o'clock. Um, so I don't get up quite, like 3 o'clock,
Yeah,
but I get up about 5:30 or 6 o'clock. But it is important to get up so that you would be able to be organized for that day, and so you can be on time and not be you know bewildered when you get where you're going. But
yeah, yeah,
my dad always said the early bird gets the worm, and that is true. And that's true because a lot of time, and my dad was a hard worker. I mean, my dad, um he believed in work. You can't have anything without working. And um I hope that a lot of the young children realize that there's nothing wrong with working. There's no shame in working. Now, a lot of young people say, well, I want to work smarter, not harder. But that doesn't mean ripping people off or being
yeah,
dishonest. You
yeah.
know, I think that means having a certain level of creativity, but not being, rogue with it.
What is the uh shucks, hold on. What is the just do this. Are you a small town country girl?
Yes. Yeah.
Because
And
you because you could have moved away and
I
went
did
to the
move
big
away.
city,
I did move away.
whatever, whatever. Yeah, tell us that.
I did move away. When I went to college, um, that I went to Duke University for undergrad, and um, those are great years because um, I kind of learned who I was and what I wanted to do during those years. But I took a course on African American history, that really, it was so important to me for a number of reasons, because my parents were, community activists, so I had their perspective. But once I actually learned in that African American course, um, it changed my life as far as race relations. And it was good for me to know that, because the field I was going into, many Black women were the last to come into that field. Black women in general, I think we're probably the last to enter into the medical field en masse, compared to today compared to previously. And having had that course, it taught me um, about what I call isms. Like, you have racism, you have sexism. There's an ignorance, and even to some degree, some stupidity in these isms. But most of these isms are based in greed. And the reason why I say that, the Africans were brought here to be free labor. The wealth that was attained with Africans here was what I call a grotesque wealth. I mean, you can't, there were some slave owners that made millions. You know how much $1 million was in the 1800s? That's like a million today or whatever. And so it was a grotesque wealth. And so it was not necessary to mistreat people. It was not necessary to not give them anything. And I learned that by learning in that African American course. I also learned about this society being what we call a race-based society. I had never heard that term before. And it's almost like, basically the racial caste system. When the society here, not here, but I'm thinking in America, when this society was created, it was created with the Black person on the bottom, basically carrying the load, and everybody else at the top. Right. And so I need our children to understand that when a lot of times we think, oh, there's no racism, it's impossible for it not to be any racism, because racism was embedded in everything that created this country, in particular, the society and the social norms are not. The thing is, when we get jobs, I know for the longest time, I would want to wear a more natural hairstyle, but I didn't feel comfortable because they're like, oh, don't wear your hair like that because someone's, whatever. Then a lot of times I would go on the interview, they would look at my training and my last name, and then I walk in, they're like, where's the applicant? I'm like, I'm here. I'm not the Irish girl that you thought you expected me to be. Right, you see what I'm saying? And so, but I see now young people are embracing that. And I love that, because you are, Anthony, the only person you are perfect at being is Anthony Brogdon.
That's right.
You are no good at being John Brown.
That's right. Let me ask you this. Being a professional who's got your wits about yourself, mm-hmm. Is it added pressure on you compared to a white person, let's say, if you can imagine, having to uplift the community? Because what I mean by you here, I'm getting to it this way. If I didn't have to think about how I got to help so many of my other Black people, I got to represent them all the time and stand up and do all this, and all I could be is a regular person, let's say, without that pressure. Or as in your case, if you didn't have to help Black people in the medical, your patients, and say some who don't have insurance, and all your people had insurance and had all the money, you could probably be further along. I'm just taking liberties and saying that. Is that added pressure on you?
No, because one of the things I've learned, and one of the things you can learn from the slaves, and see, this is the other thing. That's a new thing to hear, learning from the slave. There's a lot we could learn from the slaves. And until we start learning our history ourselves, irrelevant of Trump or anybody else, we're going to miss those lessons. My great great grandfather had, I remember when I was reading some of the information on him, he had, he worked in the fields, but he had a mule. And that didn't seem like much, but a mule was almost a side business. Because when you're going in the field, if you're not using your mule, like let's say you're working for a farm and they have a mule there for you to use, you can rent out your mule, you can take people to town for pay. There's so many things people can pay you to actually till their fields. When I started reading there, I understood why so many of my relatives have multiple streams of income. You need that because if people know that you only are dependent on them, that's when they control you. I never forget when I would go for jobs, the introductory, sessions or orientations would talk about, we have a realtor. They would have a realtor that's coming all the time to take me to get a house. And my thing was, honey, I am not buying any house here until I see how I like this job and if I'm going to be here. I have seen some people make that error. And my dad always said, if you buy a house and you've got a new job, you are theirs from now on, unless you have some way out. And so we've got to be careful not to get ourselves in these financial snares where we are owned by other people. And so as far, and actually when you mentioned the people I've taken care of, I've been fortunate to take care of all communities. Most recently, I have been treating mostly, I'd say 90% affluent, Caucasian people. And I've had a great experience with it because they are appreciative of the work I've given them. And I love my patients. So, I've had a good experience with them. But I've always been myself because I am representing my community, but I want to represent my whole community. I'm not going to leave out that I am the great great granddaughter of um my ancestors. I'm not ashamed of that. I'm proud of that because that's where you learn your work ethic. And when I learned who he was, it helped me to embrace who I was because being a black female, sometimes some of us get on airs and I'm being professional. I'm like, my patients love me because I put down the airs. I sit down with them and I'm like, listen, baby, tell me what's going on with you. And because God has blessed me to be able to help them, that is, I mean, I've been, well respected by my patients because of that. And they'll tell you that's one of the things they liked about me. And I'm not saying everybody has to be like that, but
Yeah, yeah.
it's
I got where you come from.
important to you first have to learn who you are and decide what parts of who I am I'm going to embrace. Some parts are not that good, but there's nothing wrong with it. It's important to know that. I mean, I've been reading a book, Anthony, recently that told stories of the slaves who worked with my grandfather, my great great grandfather. And some of those people's descendants are my patients. And I shared that with them, and they're like, "Oh my God, I didn't know that." I'm like, "Yeah, your great great grandfather was a well respected carpenter, so respected that the owner's grandson wrote a book talking about how he respected him and how he could do what no one else could do." And so we need to get those stories out, and that's actually what I'm working on now. You know, finding the descendants of all of those people that are in that book and letting them know, here, this is who you come from. Hold your head up. And not just that, these people are your ancestors are expecting something from you. When I looked at the electorate at 1868, when my great great grandfather and others had were going to vote, 90% of the electorate was black. Many people don't know why, but a lot of Caucasians left this area because, you know, when the unions were coming, basically being a part of the Confederacy, I guess would be considered almost a treasonous act. And so those people were getting away. They left their plantations, they left their slaves. Some of them came back, some of them did not come back. But for some time, it was a spark. The community was not that well populated by Caucasian. So most of the people who could vote were Black. But it wasn't easy for them. You still had some people who were out, some called like red shirts, and you know, I guess the KKK came later, whatever. But there were almost vigilante groups that were racist against those freemen. And so voting did have some risk, but those people were proud. But those people knew, we don't have any money, we don't have any power. The only power we have is our vote. We've got to keep people in office who are sympathetic to our cause, because they were smart enough to know, if the wrong people get in office, this very tenuous freedom can be gone.
I want to go back to something you said earlier, just before we come to a close. You said that town that your father came from was one of the worst for Black men.
Yeah.
Yeah, let's go over that, as you may know.
Okay. And so they had in Edgefield, there was, I'll never forget, when it was time for voting, there was one white man, and I think this is before the 1900s. He had a store. And so he said he was, you know, I think the people, he was okay with the people voting. They ran that man out of that. They when I tell you, they ran him out. He could barely find some place to go because the word got out, don't make him welcome there. And that was, I think his last name was Talbot. That was one family that really suffered from being just fair to the Blacks. And a lot of people, they had lynchings in that area. It just was not, it was a horrendous place, because sometimes they would, from what I read in the you know, the books I've been reading, it just was dangerous for Blacks, especially to be out by yourself at night. And I know from my family stories, they did have some threats, but my family was like, you might come here, but you're not going to leave. You know, because my family, they don't bother people. You know, they're country people that get along with their white neighbors and their Black neighbors. And you know, I never lived in Edgefield, and a lot of the people I meet from there, so far we've been able to, I mean, I've had a decent relationship with them, but our families go far back. So, you know, but that was the history there. And so I know some of the historians in that area were like, you know, our town is given a bad name, but I'm like, it's, I mean, it's written in the history books.
When we when we talked and wanted to invite you on the show, you wanted people to know not just about your history, but about how important Black history is. That kind of sums up what we're talking about. Am I right?
Yes, yes.
Let me ask you this, as we come to a close. If you had your way, what do you want to do? You say you and your cousin are doing this. Give me the 1, 2, 3 of what you want to do. How you gonna do it?
What I want to do is reach out to the youth in our community and educate them on the richness of our culture in this community.
Stop right there. How do you want to do that?
Well, what I want to do is actually, one of the things we're looking at is giving them exposure to ancestry, and kind of walking them through how they can find out who their ancestors are, and the other resources available to kind of find out some of the things they have done.
Let me stop there. So what you're asking them to do is, you're going to have meetings for them to come to your office or to the library. You're going to show them the resources for them to do that.
Well, we're actually in the process of determining exactly how we're going to do that. We're thinking that it may be better to do that in different pockets of the community, because we got certain like areas, like you have Ritter, Green Pond, Hendersonville. And first, what we want to do is find out the kids who are interested in it. A lot of people automatically say, "Oh, well, some of those kids not going to be interested," and I tell them, "Stop speaking for other people."
That's right.
If you get 3 kids interested and excited, the other kids are going to say, "You know what? Let me find out who my people are, because I don't like the
There
John.
you go. That's right. That's right. That's right.
And then the thing is, we want to teach our children how to interpret what they find, because that's going to give a, I don't know what my great great grandfather looked like, but the book Combahee helped me look at him from a different perspective. My family already knew about him, but we did not, for me, it took them from being inanimate objects to human beings. I think of my great great grandfather just like I think of my grandmother.
Because one of the things you said earlier is that you have listed a chapter of the African American Historical Genealogy site in your town, correct?
No. Well, I joined the local group that's
you joined the chapter, right?
Yeah, but I
and
start
these
what
are the things.
yeah, what we have here is we've started a historical society in our community, called the Green Pond Historical Society, to actually celebrate all the culture in that area. It's
Okay.
Yeah.
Okay, I got you.
And it's not just black; it's all black, white, all culture. Because Native Americans were there, you know, and many of the current, because see, the current plantation owners, a lot of them, they weren't the descendants of the slave owners. These are people who came from all around the world and decided this is a beautiful property, I want to buy it. And many of them have been, you know, cordial enough to give us access to some of our ancestors' graves, even though, you know, by law you can, they have to give you that, but you know, it doesn't say they have to be nice about it, you know. So I tell people, and so they have been, I think they've been very, as they've been very welcoming to give us that access and to understand we are not blaming them for anything. We just want to embrace our culture and, you know, give honor, honor to our ancestors.
Have you all? Is there a thought of starting a museum?
Yes.
All right.
And we'll talk on that later.
Okay, there's that. Let me say this. I thank you so very much for sharing that with me.
Okay.
See, because we got there. You told us where it all began for you as an individual.
Mm-hmm.
And then you said, because of this that happened in your family and you researched it, you
Mm-hmm.
found out what happened in your family.
When I was reading about my great grandfather and the work they were doing at the end of the Reconstruction era, I used to say, I get up in the morning and I said, Lord, with all this going on now, it's hard to tell if we're in 1877 or 2025.
I thank you so very much for coming on Strong Inspiration. There ain't no question. You can come back anytime. We gonna keep the, because I hear what you're saying, and I wanna stay close on your progress on all of those fronts.
Yeah.
In that town, so that hopefully what will happen is, and this is what I hope people get out of today, and having you on the show, is that okay? There are people like you who have this passion. We're going to find a way to connect it.
Oh yeah. Oh,
so that there can be a synergy among you and me. I'm gonna put myself in that category, and others. And I'm sure there's already some of those facilities, let's call them, in place, so that we can effectively see what somebody else did. We can do the same thing. And so that's another charge for me here at Strong Inspirations. So everybody hit the subscribe button.
Okay.
It's free. Hit the like button. There is no love button. Hit the notifications bell. Tell somebody about how we are mobilizing here on the show. There you go. everybody, that's the final word.
Okay.
We're gonna watch this sister grow. We're gonna watch her, and I'm gonna help y'all see her grow through strong inspirations. Go to my website, businessintheblack.net. Get you a copy of this book, Black Business Book. Please, my friends, you watch me for free, and the book is reasonably priced, which helps me maintain. I will admit. And to you, my sister, and I say this, and I mean this with all sincerity, I want you to stay strong, stay safe, stay on your grind. To you, my sister, I'll be in touch. And bye bye, we out.
Okay, thank
Thank
you.
you. Uh-huh.
All right.